Hello, ACT prep students. Miss Carter here to review the math section with you. I'm so glad that you've joined us today and that you're taking the time to get a little bit better on your ACT test. Like I've said before, I really do hope that you can join us for one of the live sessions at either the Loft or the Lodge. I think it's so helpful to practice these techniques together as a group and also to just get some more practice sessions under our belt where we can kind of mimic the actual conditions of the test. Take 60 minutes to do a 60-minute math test, go ahead and grade it together, and then see where we would have landed on the ACT scale score conversion chart so that you know as you go in kind of what your goal number is and where you've been landing on all of your practices before that. There's no magic bullet to doing really well on the ACT test. Just practice really does help make you more perfect. And so I hope you can join us for some of those. If you're joining us for this video, it will be shorter than the ACT math prep session is in person, just because we do use several YouTube videos. I'll be showing those to you today along with the YouTube website addresses for each of the videos, but I don't want to break copyright or anything, so you'll just be able to go to those on your own time. And then also I will have at both the Loft and Lodge all of the handouts that I will be handing to students this week. And also always take advantage of the big red manuals that they have there so that you can actually take the practice test sessions on your own. Today in person, we'll just be doing about a 30-40 minute practice session on the math. And then the next day, typically we take the entire math test and time it for the 60 minutes and kind of run through the whole process so that you can actually know how it feels to take that test, what kind of problems you're looking at, and how to use the tips and techniques that we'll be talking about today to actually get a lot faster on the math test. So let's just go ahead and hop into the presentation for today. Like I've told you a couple of times before, I did not major in math. I kind of majored in the opposite of math. I majored in English. And I know that I really like to talk to students and find out if they feel like they really excel in the liberal arts. I've had so many students who feel like they're strongest in maybe history, literature, their English classes, their art classes. And then I have other students who really excel in the math and science parts of their education. There are those wonderful, fortunate students who do really well in all of those subjects across the board, but don't despair on the ACT. It doesn't matter if you're really stronger in sort of one world than you are in the other. There are always things that you can do to bring up your score in what you might consider your weakest section and really improve that scale score, that overall average that the ACT reports to your colleges. So even though I didn't major in math, I know that I can do well on the ACT test as long as I keep a few things in mind and do a little bit of practice ahead of time. So as I've said before, probably there are 60 minutes to do 60 questions on the ACT math test, but it's not as simple as spending 1 minute per question. You really can't do that on this test because the level of difficulty does increase as you go through the test. So the first questions that you are encountering as a rule will be more simple than the ones that you encounter at the end of the test. Now, they will pepper in some very difficult ones toward the beginning and some very simple ones toward the end. So it's not as simple as saying number 1 is the easiest question on this test and number 60 will be the hardest question. But as a general rule, the first 40 questions will be simpler than the last 20 questions on this test, and you're going to want to plan your time accordingly and very carefully. This is how those questions usually break down. About 33 in algebra, 23 in geometry, and 4 in trigonometry. One thing that I really like students to keep in mind is that the level of difficulty kind of aside, every single one of those questions, whether it's the simplest math question you've ever seen or the most difficult, those are both worth 1 point each. So don't stress out and sweat while you're sitting in your chair. If you get to a question that you know you don't even know how to tackle, you're just going to use your letter of the day and save those precious seconds to answer the ones that you actually already have been trained to do. Those are the ones that we want to spend our precious time on. We think of time kind of like $20 bills in the ACT test. We don't want to be throwing money at the questions that maybe we can't answer. We want to be tackling the ones that we really think we could get correct. And just remember that each one of those questions are worth exactly 1 point each. All right, here's some specific detail on the math section and how it usually breaks down. Of the 33 algebra questions, 14 are pre-algebra and 10 are elementary algebra. So you should be in good shape. If you've taken 8th or 9th grade, say pre-algebra, algebra 1, you should be good. 9 of those are intermediate algebra, so you're getting into some more advanced problems. And then on the 23 geometry questions, you're looking at 14 plane geometry, so just those basic shapes and stuff that you're used to doing the formulas with. And then 9 coordinate geometry questions. So we're talking about a lot of slope scales, graphing, that kind of thing. And then again, the 4 trig questions. They don't give you any formulas when you're taking the ACT test, but you can use a calculator, and I do have that handout for you. Because there are no formulas or any kind of rules on how to use the properties of exponents or anything, a thorough review really does help before you tackle the ACT test. Although you can use a calculator, be really careful using it. Even the ACT people will warn you that it's not always quicker to use your calculator. If you are using it for a lot of the questions that you're encountering, just make sure that you're really plugging in those negative signs, that kind of thing, whenever you are encountering them. Don't make some simple mistake that you would actually notice if you were just doing it quickly on a piece of scratch paper. Actually, sometimes you'll think a little bit harder whenever you can kind of see it in front of you and you're doing the work. So if you're using the calculator, just make sure that it's not tripping you up on some of the simpler ones and that you're not just entering it incorrectly, because the incorrect answer or the answer with the wrong sign will usually be one of the options. All right, you're allowed to use simple programs in your calculator on the ACT test, and this is 4 that are highly recommended. So I have this in a handout as well. Many of the TI-83s and things like that come pre-programmed with these 4 simple ones that you can use. If your calculator doesn't have it in it anymore or it never had it, run and see one of your math teachers. Take this handout, help them, ask them to help show you how to plug these in so that you will have them available to you on the ACT math test, and ask them to run through a couple of questions like, okay, I have a slope problem that I need to solve. Can you show me, Mr. Pena, how to plug that into my calculator? When would I be seeing that? What would it look like? And know how to access it on your calculator. All right, as we said, since you're going from easiest to most difficult, there are different ways to tackle that. Know that some of them will randomly be thrown in easier or more difficult questions, but always do the now questions now. One thing that I really like to impress on ACT students is just that the ACT people do grade your math test more leniently than they do the other 3 multiple choice tests that they give you. So if you only get 2/3 of the questions right on the math test, you're actually going to get a higher score than if you only got 2/3 of the questions right on, say, your English or reading or science section. The bell curve is in your favor on this test. So don't be too stressed out if it seems like a really tough test that you're facing. They do grade you a little more favorably on this section than they do the other 3. All right. Don't forget that you can use your letter of the day. Again, don't play alphabet soup with any of these. You have 5 answer options on the math test. So pick a couple, C and H, A and F, B and G, whatever, but then stick with those and never ever leave an answer option blank. When you're using your digital watch that we recommend you have for this test, make sure that you're always paying attention to when you have maybe 1 minute or 30 seconds left. If you have any of those bubbles that haven't been filled in yet, please go back and fill those in. The only way you can 100% get it wrong is if you leave it blank. And don't forget the ballpark technique, which we use on all kinds of standardized tests, the process of elimination. If it seems like an answer is way out of range, go ahead and eliminate that and just work with the other 4 answer options. Alrighty. So 2 timing techniques that are highly recommended. And again, this is why I say it's so important to come in and do a few practice tests, is you're not going to know which one of these timing techniques really works best for you until you try both once or twice and really see which math test you get a better score on. Number 1 works for a lot of students, but number 2 is best for a lot of other students. And there's really no way of knowing that until you practice it and actually see how you do. So for number one, just go ahead and use the first half hour to do the first 40 questions on your math test. In theory, these are the simplest questions and you won't need a full minute to answer each one of them. That leaves you 30 minutes to do the last 20 questions, which are always the most difficult. Okay, so you're going to use the first half hour to do the majority of the questions, the last half hour to do the final and more difficult questions. Another way of tackling the math test, which you should practice, is to take the test twice. So the first time you're just going to go through, work every single question that you can do quickly. The ones that you can understand, you're going to go ahead and answer those now. Then you're going to go back through the entire test and work all of the ones that you left behind. Do all the difficult ones that you actually know how to work but would take you more time. And then use your letter of the day for the ones that you really don't know how to tackle. All right, I hate to say this to you, but word problems are heavy, heavy, heavy on the ACT math test. They make it a little more difficult. They know that you're pressed for time, and one of the ways that they make it a little more difficult is by phrasing so many of these math questions as word problems. Again, the ACT test is really one long reading comprehension test and kind of keeping your cool under pressure, and they will check both of those things on this one. All right, how to tackle the word problems. There are a few things that you can do. Just quick reminders. You might already know these, but number one, know the question. Read the entire problem before you start calculating anything and then underline the actual question. There will probably be excess information in that question that you don't even need to do your calculation. So make sure you know what data you need and what they are actually asking you. And then number two, let the answers help you arrive at that correct answer. Look for clues, eliminate anything that you can. And then break the problem into bite-sized pieces. Once you know what they're asking for and what answer options you're looking at, go ahead and use your scratch paper to calculate each step and make sure that you're watching out for tricky phrasing. If they're asking for blank, make sure that you're arriving at blank and not getting kind of confused by an extra bit of information that might be in there. All right, so for very specific techniques on the ACT math test, there are three. This first one is just called plugging in or substitution. This is something that you are probably used to doing, but a reminder that it's super important on the ACT math test as far as saving time is concerned. So when do I want to use plugging in? If there are variables in your answer choices, you know, X's and Y's, you can usually use substitution or plugging in. Word problems it's great for. Really, the really hard ones or simple ones, plugging in will often work. The main thing to remember about plugging in is you never want to plug in a large number. You're going to make it a lot harder on yourself than it needs to be. If you're using plugging in as a technique, then you're going to want to use maybe a 2 or a 3 and see if that works and go from there. When you're actually doing this on the ACT test, this will make sense, but you're not going to want to try 612 for your possible answer. You're going to be arriving at enormous numbers. Just use a 2 or a 3, plug it into that variable, see if it works. If it works, then you've arrived at the right answer. And here is a great website for substitution or plugging in. If you were in the live class, we would probably watch this for 10 or 11 minutes. He uses plugging in several of those answer options and really does a thorough job of explaining how it can kind of save you time. So it's very beneficial to watch this. Another ACT math strategy is called plugging in the answers, or PIDA. We want to use this kind of in the opposite corner of the ring than we do just basic plugging in. We want to use plugging in the answer, or PIDA, when there are no variables in the answer options. Usually they give all of our answer choices in ascending or descending order, so it's great for plugging in the answers on that, and I'll explain how. Or if our question asks for what or how many of something, then PIDA is an excellent option for those. So how do I use PIDA on the math test? Remember that for each question, you are going to have 5 answer options. Always start when you're using PIDA with that middle answer option. So you're always going to use C or you're always going to use H on the plugging in the answer choices. That way, if C or H is incorrect, if the number was either too big or too small, you know to go up in your answer options or down in your answer options. That way, at the very most, you are only having to try 2 answer options for every single question instead of starting at A, trying B, trying C, and then, oh, D was right. You might have to try up to 4 answer options if you just work from the top to the bottom. If you start with that middle value on any of these plugging in the answer options, then you're only going to have to try one more if C or H is not correct to arrive at the right answer. You're going to save so much time when you can use plugging in the answer appropriately on these. All right. So here's the website or the YouTube video for plugging in the middle answer. The gentleman on this YouTube video, he has several ACT prep things that I've used with students over the years. He is excellent at getting you ready, and he will, if you just watch this for maybe, I don't know, a minute and a half or two, it's really going to become clear why you would always use C or H for PITA and how you can save yourself a lot of time. So I recommend go ahead, take a picture of this video with your phone or whatever so that you can go check it out. It will save you tons of time. And then finally, solving systems of equations by using the elimination method. These are 5 fairly straightforward steps for whenever you're having to solve a systems of equations. And he is so helpful at explaining how to do that, what the 5 steps are, and how to kind of tackle those in the most straightforward manner. And here's the website address for that one. I really do hope that if you haven't joined us in person, that you can take a minute and watch these. I think it will really be beneficial to you on this math test. All right, and then a simple knowledge review of things that are pretty straightforward that hopefully we remember, but if not, you will be encountering these on the ACT math test, so it's always a good idea to take a look at them. Remember that anytime you see the word proportions on the math test, that just means part of something or a percentage of something. So proportion always means a slice of something. Mean, median, and mode will come up frequently on the ACT math test. Mean is the simplest. It just means an average of something. You have 5 numbers, you add those 5 numbers up, you divide by 5, and whatever your answer there is the average of those 5 numbers. So that one is straightforward. When you see mean, they are saying average. Median is just the number that's directly in the middle of a set of numbers. So you're going to put them in order. Think of a median on the road or whatever. So they give you the numbers, say 54, 65, 22, 38, and 63. You're going to order those in number ascending order. So 22, 38, 54, 63, 65. 54 is your middle number. So that is your median in that set of numbers. So it's really straightforward if you have an odd set of numbers. However, if you have an even set of numbers to arrive at the median, you're going to have to put them in order again. You're going to take those middle 2 numbers and you're going to derive the average of those. So in this set of numbers, 54 and 63 are the 2 central numbers. You're going to add those, divide by 2, and whatever your answer is there, that is your median for that run of numbers. And then finally, the mode is whatever number or numbers appear most frequently in a set of numbers. So if you have a set of numbers that maybe have 16 numbers and you see that the number 38 appears most frequently, that's your mode for that set of numbers. All right, remember that when you see the word integer, it is always referring to a whole number. Consecutive means ascending order. In other words, going from least to greatest value. That's what consecutive means. Remember that absolute value can never be negative. So if there are any questions or answers that are in those straight up and down brackets, they are always asking for absolute value, which can never be negative. So just remember to eliminate that from your answer options. Also, you are going to have to know the properties of exponents and how they work together and how they sort of apply in different formulas. So I do have a handout for that as well. Maybe it's been some time since you reviewed it, or maybe you're just in Algebra 1 and you're not sure about some of these. So I do have a handout for that in case you need it. And this is what it looks like. This is page 1 of 2 for that. You're going to want to review these. How do I work with a 0 exponent? What does that look like in an actual sample problem? So just make sure that you're familiar with that. All right, if you are with us in person, then what we would do now is go ahead and go to test 5 in the ACT Red Manual. So if you want to do this on your own, drop into the loft or the lodge, and we're going to work problems 31 to 60. Just know that if you're taking the test in real life, you're going to give yourself less than a minute each for those beginning ones and then a little bit longer for the last ones. So we're going to take about 37 or 38 minutes to do these questions because they're a little bit harder than if we had started with numbers 1 through 30. Thank you so much for joining us today. I really hope to see you in one of the practice sessions. I think the better you do on the ACT test, the more likely you are to really get some great scholarship opportunities. So I hope that we can help you on your journey to doing really well on the ACT test, and I hope that I get to see you in person soon. Let us know at the Loft or Lodge if there's anything that we can get for you, any questions that we can answer. If you have a different time of day that you need to meet to go ahead and run through a practice test, I would be happy to meet you there. We can open the building for you. So just let us know how we can help. Until then, I will see you soon.